Well, I was asked at the last minute to do this. It's very interesting because I immediately went onto the internet and typed Scott Lang and SIGGRAPH into the internet and only got about 500 hits. So I thought, well, in the time of this 10-minute talk that's going on, I could easily get through these. It's amazing how much outstanding service that Scott Lang has done. So one of the things he did was he was small conferences chair, as well as being chapters and all sorts of other things. And when he was small conferences chair, Scott Owen, who's our former president, gave that job to me because he felt that Scott was doing just a little bit too much. And I was, of course, instantly overwhelmed. How on earth did he do it with all these other things? And immediately started a committee and got 20 people to help me with that. So it gives me great pleasure to call Scott Lang up here to give his talk.
I am going to repeat some of what I said this morning. So those of you that were there this morning, I apologize, but it'll be scattered throughout the speech. I would like to begin by thanking ACM SIGGRAPH and the awards committee for this honor. It is a really big deal for me. And it's very humbling to receive this award knowing the people who have gotten it in the past. And I again want to mention how pleased I am to receive it the year after Mary Whitten, because Mary was and continues to be one of my mentors, and she's someone who has always exemplified what service and professionalism mean. I'd also like to acknowledge the others receiving the awards today. I'm really very proud to be sharing the stage with you guys, so thank you for that. And before I get much further into speech, I do want to take a moment to thank my family, those closest to me, for their constant and unwavering support. Unfortunately, none of them can be here today, but I'd like to acknowledge them. So my wife, Kat, and I actually met through, I'm going to forget to change slides. My wife, Kat, and I met through ACM SIGGRAPH, so she understands the time and energy that go into a chapter event, a conference, etc. But even so, I often asked her to share me with ACM SIGGRAPH in a way that is not always fair to her. And I want to thank her for always supporting me and putting up with just one more email, I promise. I love you very much. My parents and my sister have been there for everything. They are the ones that helped me to instill a set of morals and a sense of right and wrong that still guides me to this day. They've always encouraged me to explore and to try and to succeed, and yes, at times, to fail. By their own actions, they've taught me how to conduct myself in a way that stresses hard work and fairness to others. Mom, Dad, Andrea, thank you. Over the last few months, I've struggled with what type of speech I should give today, much like Tom was saying. After numerous starts and stops, I realized that I have the opportunity to not only share with you what being an ACM SIGGRAPH volunteer means to me, but also the chance to encourage all of you to get involved and play a larger role within the ACM SIGGRAPH organization. As I started planning my talk, I realized that much of what appeals to me about ACM SIGGRAPH is also part of the reason I enjoy teaching so much. I began to see parallels I'd not thought about before. So while I'm sharing with you about my time as an ACM SIGGRAPH volunteer, I'll also be sharing a bit about my experiences as a teacher. Sorry, I'll try and be better about that. Passion is a trait that all volunteers require. You're giving your time, your energy, your heart, so when you decide to get involved with any group, there should be some passion behind that commitment. For the last 25 years, I've been very fortunate to work as a teacher in the K-12 arena with those who are passionate about education. I began my career at the United Nations International School, or UNIS, in New York City. And over my 7 years there, I worked with a number of people who encouraged me to pursue my enthusiasm for technology with my students, and none more so than Dr. Joseph Blaney, the former director of the school. Since 1996, I've had the pleasure of working at a magnet school in New Jersey, the Bergen County Academies, also known as BCA. At BCA, there are a few people I'd like to acknowledge for their support. My former principal, Pat Cosgrove, not pictured, I apologize, and my current superintendent, Dr. Howard Lerner, have always provided tremendous assistance for me to do the best job possible. My current principal, Russell Davis, has helped me to create an environment where our students can come to experiment and learn, and most importantly, dream. I'd like to thank him for making the Bergen County Academies the type of institution that I look forward to going to each morning. But before all of that, before I had a job, before I was involved with ACM SIGGRAPH, I was a college student searching for something that I could be passionate about. As a student at New York Institute of Technology, I had some terrific professors, including Ted Tang and Peter Voci, and I took some great courses. But I still wanted to find a way to get more involved with the field of computer graphics, so as a computer science student, it made sense to restart the ACM student chapter on campus, so that's what I did. And that was the beginning of my involvement with chapters. But the real impact of this decision came a year or so later when I saw an announcement for a new group called New York City ACM SIGGRAPH. New York City ACM SIGGRAPH was run by a woman named Carol Ciani. And if you were in New York City during the 1980s and you were in any way even remotely connected with computer graphics, you were either friends with Carol or you just hadn't met her yet. She had this dynamic personality that drew people in and made you want to work with her. Carol's office in Soho was always buzzing with people and new technology. There was an energy present at that time in New York and everywhere else because everything was so new in those days. Hardware and software was coming out on what felt like a weekly basis, and users were already pushing the boundaries. Carol was my first real mentor, and in addition to giving me the chance to take on new tasks within a chapter, she always shared her complete enthusiasm for computer graphics with me and everybody else. Over time, her passion passed to me, and as a result, I am still a part of the New York City ACM SIGGRAPH chapter 28 years later. I do not know how things would have turned out had I not met Carol, but I did, and for that I'm very grateful. As I mentioned above, passion is very important if you're going to volunteer. But there are other aspects of being a volunteer that are also important. Learning, the ability to work with others as part of a team, and inspiration are also vital to making your volunteer experience a worthwhile one. As we're often told, learning is a lifelong activity, and nowhere is that more true than the teaching profession. I've found over the years that teaching is actually a terrific way to learn more about that which you want to teach. Similarly, within ACM SIGGRAPH, working as a volunteer is a terrific way to help others to become volunteers while constantly improving what it is that you do as a volunteer. One of the first things I tell my students is that I don't know everything. Yes, I can help them with the big picture stuff and provide the foundation for most of what they're going to do, but as far as which button to push to get a certain effect or which texture looks best on a particular model, those are answers I won't always have at my fingertips, nor should I. Part of learning is trying things out and, yes, failing from time to time. At UNIS, I had the absolute privilege of working with Alice Ann Winter. Alice Ann was the poster child for lifelong learning. Well into her third decade when I first met her, her third decade teaching. Sorry, just realized. She was the consummate early adopter. If there was a new computer or new technology coming out that she thought was interesting, she'd buy it and bring it into school so that we could test it out. I spent countless days, nights, weekends with Alice Ann figuring out how we can integrate new technology into the school curriculum. All the while, she always stressed how important it was that we never got lazy or complacent and that we constantly looked forward so that we would be able to prepare our students for whatever came next. Alice Ann helped me to understand just how important it is to never stop learning. In my current job, I work with some amazingly talented individuals. We're always talking to see how we can work together on interdisciplinary projects that utilize those skills we want to pass on to our students. I'd like to just acknowledge a couple of them. Mike Leva, Joe DeFalco, Bill Pavlu, and Peter Guthrie are just some of the teachers that I work with on a regular basis. And they're people that help me move forward with projects and with new things. ACM SIGGRAPH has also provided me with constant opportunities to learn. The people I've gotten to meet, the places I've gotten to visit, the opportunities to produce events and activities, they've all contributed to who I am as a person. I first met Judson Rosebush at a New York City ACM SIGGRAPH event and was impressed immediately. I got to know Judson much better through his involvement with the New York City ACM SIGGRAPH board and when he served as chair in the 1990s. Judson is the type of person who would sit and give you advice on any topic you asked him about, even some you don't ask him about. I learned a great deal from Judson about how to conduct yourself in a professional manner, how to deal with difficult people, and how to engage team members in activities. I will forever be grateful to Judson for the many hours we spent together. When I first got involved with the ACM SIGGRAPH chapters, they were known as local groups, and they were run by a gentleman named Lou Katz. There was a local group steering committee, a precursor to today's chapters committee, which I served on in the early 1990s. There weren't many written rules on guides or guidelines at that time, so we did a lot of learning by doing. Two of the people on that committee have gone on to hold major roles within both ACM SIGGRAPH and ACM. As a testament to their dedication, I'm lucky enough to still be working with them today. I'd like to acknowledge Alan Chenet, a previous ACM SIGGRAPH and ACM president, and Jeff Jordan, ACM SIGGRAPH president, for the support they've provided me over the last 20 years. Two individuals that I'm constantly learning from are Jenny Dana and Jamie Radman. Both of these women are the kind of dedicated, responsible, and professional volunteers that ACM SIGGRAPH can never have enough of. Jenny has worked tirelessly as part of the chapters committee and then as the ACM SIGGRAPH Director for Information Services. So much of what we can do as an organization electronically goes back to the work that Jenny and her committee did to establish coherent policies across the many groups that make up ACM SIGGRAPH. Jenny, I shouldn't have looked at you. Thank you for your constant attention to detail and never-ending quest to always make sure our servers are up and running. Jamie and I worked together with the ACM SIGGRAPH Scoop team, and that was a great experience. But Jamie's greatest contribution to ACM SIGGRAPH was her ability to create a clear and consistent social media structure for ACM SIGGRAPH. Working with the many groups that make up ACM SIGGRAPH, Jamie and her team helped our social media network to grow in an exponential manner for 3 years. Jamie left her position at ACM SIGGRAPH last year, but I want to let her know how grateful I am for the work she did and that I miss her terribly. One of the biggest challenges for some new volunteers is the desire to do everything at once. I know, I've been there. Enthusiasm is great. Unchecked enthusiasm, not so much. I mention this because one of the most important things I've learned as a volunteer is that sometimes the best thing I can do is stop, listen, and then ask questions. It's not always about just rushing into things. I might have a terrific idea that I feel is a no-brainer, win-win proposition. However, without the context of work already done in the past, I may not be aware of the challenges that others have already dealt with or are dealing with. This is why it's so important for every volunteer to appreciate the importance of working as part of a team. One of the most basic concepts to grasp as a volunteer within ACM SIGGRAPH is that nothing happens without the support of others. So, while I am standing up here alone, I'd like to take a moment to let everyone who has ever worked with me that today a bit of you each is up here with me as well. Teamwork for me is one of the most exciting aspects of being an ACM SIGGRAPH volunteer. There's something very satisfying about taking an idea and turning it into reality with a group of people. Learning how to listen to others, being able to compromise for the greater good, fulfilling a commitment once you make it, these are all life skills that will serve you well, not only in ACM SIGGRAPH, but in your everyday activities. At both UNIS and BCA, I've been lucky enough to work with colleagues that shared my passion for teaching. Through our collaborative efforts, we've been able to provide opportunities and experiences that prove the sum is greater than the individual parts. Alice Ann, my very good friend Jim Bartlett, Doug Fairchild, and John Ingram are just some of the people from UNIS. At BCA, my collaborators include John Branda, Mary Beth Brace, Mi Young Min, and Elise Casano. And there are many more, but I don't want to spend the whole time just running off names. As a teacher, it is so important to have others around you that you can bounce ideas off of and get feedback from. My thanks to all of my colleagues that helped me to be the best teacher I can be. Within the ACM SIGGRAPH organization, I've been equally as fortunate. New York City ACM SIGGRAPH has been blessed with an amazing cast of characters since its inception. In addition to Carolyn Judson, I'd like to recognize a few. R.B. Schumann, Cheryl Stockton, Isaac Curlow, Heidi Dunphy, Lucian Harriet, Rick Barry, Lynn Pocock, Michael Hosenfeld, Steve Rittler, Welba Koenig, and Scott Sindorf. And I apologize that I can't thank everyone from New York City ACM SIGGRAPH individually, so please understand that all of you are in my thoughts today. Within the ACM SIGGRAPH organization, I've worked with many terrific people across the various organization committees I've been involved with. Whether it was small conferences or the executive committee, SIGGRAPH conference, or student volunteers, there are far too many people to thank them all individually. But I must thank some of them for the time we spent together as volunteers within ACM SIGGRAPH. I mentioned Mary earlier as one of my first mentors. Another person who helped me when I first joined the executive committee was Scott Owen. In those early years, Scott was one of the biggest backers for both me and the ACM SIGGRAPH chapters, and I've never forgotten that support. I've also been privileged to work with other volunteers that I respect and admire a great deal. These include John Fuji, Stephen Spencer, Adele Newton, Alan Rockwood, and Preston Smith. Thank you for being role models, whether you knew it or not. There's one more group which I'd like to acknowledge, which many of you may not be aware are a big part of the ACM SIGGRAPH family. And these are the contractors that work with volunteers to put on conferences such as SIGGRAPH and SIGGRAPH Asia, and support organization entities such as the Executive Committee. And I use the word family because that is what we are. I can tell you from years of experience that some of our contractors put in so much time, they qualify as volunteers. As I've already mentioned before, it is impossible for me to thank all of the terrific people I've had the pleasure to work with. And rather than leave anyone out, please know how much I and all our volunteers appreciate the work you do for us on a regular basis. During my time within the ACM SIGGRAPH organization, I've had the chance to work with many groups. Lately, I've been very lucky to work with a fantastic collection of volunteers and conference SVs as part of the SCOOP team. I'd like to thank all of them for the tremendous effort they always put in and for making my time at SIGGRAPH a much more enjoyable experience. But over the years, the main focus of my volunteer activities has been with the ACM SIGGRAPH Chapters Network. As an ACM SIGGRAPH chapter leader, I'm part of a group that spans 50 cities and universities in over 15 countries around the world. As with so many of the groups I've already mentioned, I'd love to recognize everyone that I've worked with. But in the case of the chapters, this is literally an impossible task. There are hundreds of people I've gotten to know through my work with the chapters. The chapters committee team is a small group of people that give time over the course of the year to work behind the scenes to support the larger ACM SIGGRAPH Chapters Network. For everyone that has served as part of the PSCC with me, you have my eternal gratitude. I must recognize a few individuals that I've worked with for well over a decade and who have made a real difference in the growth of the Chapters Network. Thierry Frey and Fran McAfee have both served at various times as Chapters Committee chairs and as members of the ACM SIGGRAPH Executive Committee. Brad Lawrence has worked tirelessly as a member of the Orlando ACM SIGGRAPH chapter and as a member of the Chapters Committee also. Guys, thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing our work together. One of the reasons that the chapters has always held such appeal for me is that each chapter is its own grassroots operation, working as part of a larger entity. For that reason, every chapter tends to have its own local flavor, if you will, a focus that is indicative of the community in that city or region or school. At the same time, chapters encourage a level of year-round, face-to-face interaction between unique populations that cannot be duplicated with chats or texts or conference calls. And for me, this is a big part of what is so appealing about ACM SIGGRAPH as a whole. We are not solely programmers or artists or researchers or teachers. We are all of these things. And ACM SIGGRAPH gives us the opportunity to work with one another. We have the chance to engage people we might not ever meet if we all stayed locked into our fields. This cross-fertilization of ideas is at the very core of what has allowed ACM SIGGRAPH to grow and thrive as the vibrant and inspirational organization it has been for the last 40-plus years. And the importance of this collaborative spirit should not be underestimated as we look to the future and what I hope will be at least another 40 years of memorable experiences. All right, the hard part. So, what inspires me? These are my kids. No, I had nothing to do with their birth, and I was not around for the first 14 years of their lives, but make no mistake, they are my kids. I talk with them inside and outside of class. I think about them after they've left, and I worry about them if I don't see them for a few days. And when they graduate, I miss them more than they'll ever know. I've been very lucky to work in 2 great schools, and even more important, I've had the opportunity to work with truly special students. They make me proud every day. I really do love my kids, and there isn't anything I wouldn't do for them. These people, my students, my kids, they're who inspire me. So why am I telling you this? Well, just as my kids inspire me, it's always been the people of ACM SIGGRAPH that inspire me in my volunteer activities. The people are always the biggest part of ACM SIGGRAPH. Yes, seeing the latest visual effects or trying out a new piece of hardware or learning about the latest technical advances are all very cool, but ultimately it is about the people within ACM SIGGRAPH. All of the individuals who I've mentioned in my speech today have inspired me. And in turn, I hope that I've inspired others who've then gone on to inspire even more. I've made many close friends through my volunteer activities with ACM SIGGRAPH, and as a result, my life has been that much richer. I can remember sitting in a darkened theater at one of my first big New York City ACM SIGGRAPH events, and Luxor Jr. came on screen. I can still feel my eyes welling up and tears running down my face. In that moment, I knew that working with computer graphics was what I wanted to do with my life. And while the animation itself was the draw, I couldn't help but wonder, who are the people that came up with these ideas? How do they make everything look so lifelike? Do they need an intern? I should have followed up on that. Oh well. When I'm asked about why I've given so much time to ACM SIGGRAPH, I tell people about that moment. After experiencing that, I knew I wanted to help other people feel the same thing that I did. And ultimately, that inspiration boils down to people. My hope for today is that over the course of this week, some of you will be inspired to get involved with ACM SIGGRAPH as a volunteer. There are so many ways to do this that no matter what your field of study, no matter where you live, no matter how old you are, you should be able to find something that appeals to you. If you live in a city or go to a school with an ACM SIGGRAPH chapter, go to a meeting. If you like what you see, volunteer some time, maybe help plan an event. If there is no chapter in your area, maybe there's enough interest to start one. Are you working on an animation or an interactive installation? Submit your work to SIGGRAPH or SIGGRAPH Asia. If you're a student, find out what types of services we have available through our Student Services Committee. Are you an educator? Check out our Education Committee. Like the arts? Find out more about our Digital Arts Committee. My point here is that if you want to volunteer for ACM SIGGRAPH, there are plenty of opportunities to do so. And I encourage each of you to take that step and find out what you can do to contribute to ACM SIGGRAPH. And maybe in 15 or 20 years, I'll be sitting down there listening to you talk about your experiences as an ACM SIGGRAPH volunteer. Thank you very much.